We actually did not have a fully functioning software when we closed our first enterprise customer. The startup world, nothing is really just like perfect. A lot of stuff is just tied up with duct tape, you know? And so what we did when we first closed our first customer, which was Dell Technologies, right? One of the biggest, hardware companies in the world. We had a landing page that we built on Wix, and our database and backend was just Airtable. When we closed that Dell contract, I started hitting up every investor. And I wasn't like, oh, hey, we need money. Like, we closed the contract. I'm like, what do you need to see from a revenue perspective for you to feel excited about investing?
You raised over 2.1 mil. Had you moved beyond the Airtable back end when you raised that money?
It seems like it's a huge far cry from where we were when we closed the Dell contract, but it was really only like 4 or 5 months later, you know?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Custom Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Baines, and this show is all about introducing you to amazing Black and Latino STEM professionals that you need to be aware of, and then also giving you guys the tools and the resources that you need to be successful in your own STEM journey. I'm really excited to have today's guest. We got Chandler Malone. He is a serial entrepreneur, successful startup founder, raised over $2.1 million for his latest startup, Bootup, which he's going to talk about here in a minute, and really doing a lot in the space to help people upskill, gain new skills, and then also get into the tech industry. So I'm really excited to have Chandler on the show. Chandler, thanks for joining. How you doing this afternoon, bro?
Look, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. Glad it's Friday though, too.
Hey, I feel you, man. I know you had probably had a busy week, a lot going on, but hopefully you get a chance to step out this weekend and take a little break, a little breather on the Miami nightlife. I'm assuming it's a good night scene out there. Is that the case?
Yeah, oh, it's definitely a lot. It's Miami, but I will say just right now where I'm at in my journey, I really haven't been able to partake like that. But I will say that because there's so many options, I feel like it makes it easy for me to not get distracted, right? Like I don't ever feel like I'm missing out on anything, you know?
Nice. Yeah, we might talk about Miami a little bit. I hear a lot of people are moving out there and the tech scene is really blowing up. So we'll probably hit on that a little bit. But we got to jump into it and get started by talking about Boot Up and the cool stuff you're doing out there. So let the people know like what Boot Up is, what you got going on, what's the project that you're building right now.
Yeah. So Boot Up is a startup that I launched in December of 2020. What we do is we help people get their first jobs in tech, regardless of their academic or professional background. We've been working on the company since 2020. Since then, we've helped over 2,000 people get their jobs in tech, first jobs in tech for over $150 million in annualized salaries, placed people at companies like Best Buy, Dell, JP Morgan, Microsoft, Amazon, you name it. On the other side, still trying to stay focused right on, building more pathways for economic mobility for Black and brown folks. And so spending a little bit of time making some angel investments in the early stage Black and brown founders. And then recently just launched a nonprofit to help more Black and brown folks in South Florida get into the tech space as well.
Nice, man. It sounds like you doing everything that can be done in the space. So I'm really glad to see it. And I really think what you're doing is really going to move the needle in terms of getting people higher paying jobs and then really helping close that racial wealth gap. Was that the motivation for starting Boot Up, or what was kind of the spark that kind of started the idea?
Yeah, man, definitely. So I think there were things in the immediate term that just kind of like let me understand that there was opportunity there. But I think there was just things that I experienced throughout my entire life that put my mindset in a direction, to start that company, And so, the first thing I'll say is just like in the immediate term, right? I had moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was working at an early stage technology investment firm or venture capital firm. Oklahoma as a state has a really unique situation, right? They've got more folks with college degrees that leave the state every year than that come to the state every year. And
Mm,
so, our job at the fund, we're trying to fund technology companies, but you don't have enough skilled workers. And so the type of company that it made sense to fund first would be companies that would provide the community with more skilled workers, with more tech talent. And so basically I spent the whole first quarter of 2020 just researching boot camps, alternative education space, just to learn as much as I could to be able to help equip Oklahoma with the talent that it needed. And so from there, right, I saw, right, from all this research, college enrollment had been declining every year for 11 years in a row. Fast forward to now, it's 14 years in a row now. So with that being said, we're seeing that these programs are growing 50% year over year while college enrollment is declining. What can I do to help employers feel more comfortable hiring from these programs, to help individuals feel more comfortable signing up for these programs, and just generally increase adoption. And so that's really what led to Boot Up.
Nice. And so kind of talk to me a little bit more about the platform. So right now, if somebody goes on Bootup's website, are they gonna see a portal where they can kind of access all these different coding bootcamp programs, or are they gonna go through an actual bootcamp program on the website itself?
So when an individual goes to the platform, they'll get hit with the survey. That survey is asking them things about themselves, their learning styles, their lifestyle, just everything about them to help be able to provide them with a recommendation for the best skill set for them and then the best actual boot camp to carry that out. Then we offer the boot camps a CRM that allows them to have data points on each individual candidate, right? And so we give the boot camps that CRM for free because that's super valuable for us. We need to know how each of the candidates are doing. And then at the end of the day, this is still a new pathway for employers to be hiring from. And so with that being said, the employers need more data points to feel comfortable hiring this talent as well. And so, once candidates complete the boot camp and we've got all these data points on them from our CRM, we then go match them up with a job opportunity with one of our employer partners. And so, end to end, somebody can come to the Boot Up platform, get recommended to a job training program, start that job training program within the month. That program, be anywhere from like 4 to 7 months, and then spend a month or two on the job, search time, and really like a 6 to 9 month full end to end period.
Yeah, man. I think that's what really got me excited about boot camps, to be honest with you, because I went the traditional route of like, so I'm an engineer by trade. I went the whole 4.5 years undergrad, crazy enough to sign up for grad school. So I did another 2 years. And I was like, all right, I'm set for life. Like, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. But as soon as I got out there, like, I really found like the job hunt was very challenging because like employers don't really care about the degree so much. They really want to see skills and experiences that are relative to the degree or the job that you're applying for. And most people don't have like 20, 40, 60, 80 grand hanging around so they can just go sign up for a university. So I think boot camps are really changing the way the game and the landscape is right now and really helping close that talent gap. I'm really excited to see what the future looks like, though. I'm really a big fan of tech apprenticeship programs. People actually, no longer paying for programs, but actually getting paid to learn. And I think it's a great way to attract more talent and retain talent. What are your thoughts and what are the trends that you're kind of seeing in the space currently?
Oh man, that's the direction that it's going. And I mean, even for us, we are in the midst of making a pivot in our business, right? What we did before served us and served our customers super well, right? As evidenced by those 2,000 people that we helped get their first jobs. But at the end of the day, the boot camps, while they are more accessible, than necessarily like a 4 year option, there are even better options coming out now, right? Like companies are starting to build out their own in-house boot camps where if you get accepted to the boot camp, which is free because it's being sponsored and subsidized by the company. If you complete that boot camp, then you've got a full-time job. Some companies that are doing programs like that, just to name a few, are like Netflix, Shopify, right? And those are two of the top, tech companies out there. You also look at, other companies, right? Like Reviture, right? Like Catalyte, right? That offer folks an opportunity to go get paid while they're doing a learning program, maybe work as a contractor for a few years. That actually gives them an opportunity to get some work experience under their belt and then makes it easy for them to matriculate right into that full-time role. And so, I'm always going to be, a proponent of doing what's best for you. But I think, we're starting to see more and more models that are more cost effective, even, than the boot camps are. And so we're really excited to start moving our product into working directly with enterprises. And so when we work directly with enterprises, what we'll be doing is co-creating curriculum with them. And then with that co-created curriculum, we're going to offer them our software platform where they can track and manage their employees who they're upskilling and reskilling for those technical roles they need to fill.
That's amazing. I really think that's a missing piece. Both are great, but especially the software component because I think a lot of times entry level employees don't realize that like the job market is not a meritocracy, right? Like a lot of times it comes down to who you know. And sometimes people come up with these random job descriptions and these random reasons why they promote people. But I think if you guys are creating a software, it's like you can kind of track where the employees are currently in their career, what skills they have, and where might the skill gap be, and who might be some talented individuals that they're kind of overlooking. I think that might even do a lot of good work in like the DEI space where we see people that, are underhired or are not getting the promotions that they should be based on their talent and their experience. So I think that's a really key component that you guys are adding in there.
Yep. And I mean, like, look, I feel like you have more data on anything. It allows you to be more accurate, right? It allows you to spot out and remove bias. And so
Yeah.
for us, right, like we don't have any AI integrated into our platform right now. But if you notice the way that I'm talking about how we do things, like data is a very core component of what we do always. And so I would love for us to be in a position where eventually we're using AI to recommend to the companies who they should hire. And that AI is not biased, right? The AI is
Yeah.
actually unbiased. And the person that we're recommending you to hire isn't based upon who you like, what they look like, any of those factors other than whose performance and the specific skill sets matches what the company needs the most.
Nice. I love it. I love it. So you mentioned a couple people, Netflix and Spotify. I'm always trying to, get people the game when they can. What other companies should people kind of be aware of that are either doing these in-house upskilling programs or people that be providing like scholarships for apprenticeship programs? We're gonna talk about your nonprofit in a minute, so don't give that away. But
Yeah.
what other like
Microsoft's got a great program. Accenture's got a great program. Amazon's got a great program. CodePath is working with Salesforce on a really great program as well. And so, I mean, look, this is one of those things where I can't even name all of them off the top of my head. But if you go and start doing research on subsidized job training programs, on subsidized engineering, on subsidized software development training programs, you're going to find dozens of companies that are offering this to folks free of charge, where you can go have a job opportunity waiting for you on the other end. And it's like, for me, I don't see really a lose in that situation, right? You getting a valuable skill for free that you are going to be able to use for the rest of your life to take care of yourself, your family, your community, et cetera.
you mentioned off camera, you're doing a lot of good stuff in the nonprofit world. You partnered up with, I guess, a local Miami legend, and you guys are coming up with a program where you're going to be providing free boot camp scholarships and then also paying people a livable wage. I kind of gave away a lot of it, but go ahead and give the people like all the information and how they can check out this program and everything.
Yeah, man. First of all, want to encourage folks to visit the nonprofit at www.techknowledge.org. And that's spelled www.techknowledge.org. And so, just to kind of give a little bit of background, moved to Miami in December of 2021. Was going out to visit, a number of times before I actually made the decision. And in October, went out and I met a gentleman named Ted Lucas. Ted started Slip and Slide Records with, Trick Daddy, Trina, Rick Ross, did an album for Pitbull, did a mixtape for Kodak Black, just a fixture in the entertainment and, hip hop scene here in South Florida. And when we first connected, he told me about this nonprofit technology that he wanted to launch. I shared what we were doing in Bootup, with helping folks get their first jobs in tech. We just kind of continue to stay in touch. Once I moved to Miami, we invested in a couple of young Black founders together, which I think that just allowed us to, build more of a relationship with one another, get to know each other, get to understand each other's character, each other's motivations, and all of those things. And then, at the end of the summer, we started talking about, okay, what can we do really to amplify, one another's work? And so really excited for our first cohort to launch actually February 28th. Our second cohort will launch April 1st, and then our third cohort will launch May 1st. And so basically what we're doing is we're doing fully subsidized job training programs for Black and Brown South Floridians. And so when we say fully subsidized, tuition for these programs is completely free, but we're also paying you a living wage while you're going through the program. And the sponsors and donors for the program have one job opportunity waiting for each candidate at the end of the program. And so, we really, really, really want to encourage as many folks in South Florida to tap into the website to apply. Because at the end of the day, right, like we know, and this is why you even, put this podcast together, right? It's like the average entry level tech worker is making over 70K a year. The average Black and Brown tech worker mid career is making over 130 a year, right? Like that's life changing for a lot of folks. And to be in a situation where you can do that for yourself, but maybe your whole family can have that, right? It just changes the entire equation of what our freedom, what our economic mobility, what our opportunity, what our future looks like, as Black and Brown folks in this country.
Man, it's amazing. I think a lot of people might need to investigate moving to South Florida, man, just for the program. I mean, it really sounds like I don't know what your requirements are, but it really sounds like if somebody did consider moving down there, that could really change their life if they got into the program. One question first about like logistics. You said the next cohort, the second one will be April 1st. Do you have like an application deadline for that already, or is that on the website that they can find all that info?
Yep, all the info is on the website. We today's the last day to apply for that 28th, for that February 28th cohort. And so I will be online late tonight, just going through everything, getting back to folks next week. But yeah.
All right, cool. And then what have you guys even thought about like long-term goals? 'Cause
Oh yeah.
something like this, we need it in Houston too. Let's go ahead
Yep.
and make it happen. But what's the long-term goal? You guys want to go nationwide with it or what?
Oh, definitely. We need to do what we set out to do here in South Florida and get those results here. Right? Florida's a great place. Miami's a great place. If you're in tech, but also because of all of the movement and activity, for tech workers moving to Miami, right? It's made it a lot harder for folks who live in Miami to be able to maintain their life, right? Like we talked about this before the show started, right? Earn Your Leisure came out with that report last week that showed that Miami had the highest increase in housing prices over the past 20 years of any metro in this country, right? And that affects black and brown Miamians heavily, Yeah.
No, that's a good point. So I think it's good, man. I'm really looking forward to that. I think that could change people's lives. They will change people's lives. So I'm really looking forward, and I'll keep up with you guys' progress and how things go. And I would even love to have one of the graduates on the program. You mentioned Catalyte earlier. I had a Catalyte graduate come on. She's now working at Bloomberg, making over six figures. So I know these programs can change people's lives. So I really want to kind of keep up with the journey and see how things are going. One last question for you, kind of on the tech bootcamp space. We already kind of talked about some great employers that are doing some good upskilling programs. What are you seeing, or what kind of recommendations would you make in terms of the actual skills to pursue? Because we got like front end, back end, full stack, cyber, IT. You got a lot of different options. You got tech sales. What have you kind of seen in this space in terms of what employers are looking for?
Yeah. So I'll say just in terms of job openings, if you go full stack, you are going to give yourself the largest surface area to be able to get a job quickly. With that being said, I recommend that you go pick up the skill set that is best with your interests, with your talents, with your gifts, with who you are. Because at the end of the day, right, like this is what you're going to be doing for work. This is what you're going to be spending most of your time doing. And so I don't recommend just doing one just because it's the highest paid or because it's the one that's the most in demand. But with that being said, full stack is always going to be the most in demand. That allows you to go front end, that allows you to go back end. And then other areas where we're seeing a ton, cybersecurity is growing rapidly and data science is growing rapidly. Obviously, data science is growing rapidly with the emergence of all these AI tools. Tech sales, we love for folks who aren't necessarily the type of person to just be able to sit in front of the computer, all day, right? And tech sales, honestly, from a financial upside, really has more upside than almost all of the, opportunities, with the exception of software engineering. And then, UX UI design, we're seeing less job openings for that. But we're also seeing that those are job opportunities that folks with less experience can get a little bit easier when they have familiarity with the tools, because there's a little bit more art than science to that. And so, yeah, I hope that answers.
For sure, it definitely does. I get the question a lot, people trying to figure out which way to go. And I'm really glad you mentioned number one, align it with your interests and what you're passionate about and what you can wake up each and every day and enjoy doing. So I think that's great advice. And it just goes to the point, they got a lot of options. I think that kind of covers the boot camps, all those different things. I really want to kind of back up a little bit in your own personal journey. You mentioned that you spent some time in Tulsa, Oklahoma as a venture capital working at a VC firm.
Yep.
And I think that's really cool. I also read in the Mogul Millennial write up about you that you did that intentionally to try to learn how to be a better entrepreneur. I'm interested to learn what takeaways did you take from that job and what kind of trends did you see for good entrepreneurs or good startup founders?
Yeah. The first thing that I'll say is these folks that go out and raise, that first round of capital, they've got a vision, but nothing is as put together as you initially expect. And me realizing that gave me so much more confidence walking in the room pitching. And I think that confidence piece I cannot emphasize enough, because at the end of the day, when folks are cutting you checks to go build a multi-billion-dollar business and you don't even got a single paying customer yet, one of the only things that they can really index on is your confidence, right? They can look at your background and they can try to see how well you know the space that you're working in, right? But being able to just understand, right? You coming in early, everything doesn't have to be perfect. For you to come in with a level of energy, I think is super, super important. Other stuff that I learned, right, is just vocabulary, right? Being able to present in a certain type of way. while it may not necessarily be the clearest indicator of how well you know something, right? This is about perception, right? Perception is reality. And so just being able to use the vocabulary, right, that folks were using became incredibly helpful and important for me. And then I think the last thing I'll say is like a lot of us don't know about different business models and different growth models because we haven't been exposed to them. For me, that was like one of my first jobs right out of school, right? And so, it's not like I had seen, a ton of different business models, but I remember we did a deal into a company called Televet, right? And they're like a telehealth, telemedicine platform for pet owners and veterinarians, right? And so for them, they started talking about doing a user acquisition strategy that utilized channel partnerships, right? And I remember I had no clue what a channel partnership was at all. And so I'm thinking that they're going calling vets or emailing vets trying to get one veterinarian's office on the platform. No, apparently there were private equity firms that were buying up 50 to 100 vet practices and rolling them up into one business. And so what they did is they would just go to those private equity firms and be like, hey, we've got a product for your 50 to 100 veterinarian offices. And so, just seeing some of those like tricks in the trade that folks will use to grow quickly, and just different business models that are out there that aren't highly apparent, to folks, definitely equipped me to come through like a lot more confident, and yeah, just a lot stronger of a pitcher.
I like that example you gave with channel partnerships. It also reminds me of like the book Blitzscaling, where Reid Hoffman talks about like distribution. You got to think about how you're gonna get your product out there. You don't want to be going knocking on each individual door telling people to download your app, right? You want to like take a more strategic approach to it and get more people at one time. So I think that's a great example. Real quick, just curious, just a quick side note. How did you land that VC job? Because you said it was one of your first jobs out of college.
Yeah, yeah, man. So I feel like when I first found out about just the opportunities in tech, like I dropped everything and tried to like make my life as intentionally centered around it. And so to just go a step back, right? When I first went to college, I'm like, oh, I want to go be a lawyer. And I had no reason for knowing that other than like, I'm like, I know lawyers make money and like, I don't want to have a certain type of life with my family. And so I'm gonna go do that. But my sophomore year, I took a class that was like, in these like writing intensive, kind of like pre-law courses. That was called Digital Technologies and the Anxieties of Modern Media. Had to write a 20-page research paper on Snapchat. You got to think I'm 19 years old. I'm using Snapchat every day. Evan Spiegel, who started Snapchat in his 20s, I'm like, oh, this is crazy. And then I write my final research paper on Square. And it's like, I remember having to pay cash going to the barbershop, and now I can swipe my card in the barber's phone in the barbershop. And the gentleman, Jim McKelvey, who was the co-founder who actually built the reader, he was a professor at my university as well. And so I had this crazy proximity to these two products that were in my life that I was using daily, that I had to go deep and do research on. When I saw how big and just how much of an amplifier, right, technology is on anything, I'm like, okay, I got to drop everything and figure out how to get in here. And so I was running a company in undergrad at the same time. We were basically just hosting events and parties. We grew to, bringing in, Billboard, artists and whatnot. But my entrepreneurial experience was like, okay, where do I go now to actually learn what the tech entrepreneurship looks like? That's when I went to a venture firm my junior year of college. I was just like, look, I don't need y'all to pay me. I just want to sit here and learn from y'all. And I started working for those folks for 20 hours per week for free. And so doing that my junior year with a full course load, also running my business, I think the signal that that gave to folks, just in terms of like my seriousness, in the space, was super strong. And so, you fast forward to the next year, hosted a venture capital speaker series where I'm bringing in, VCs, which coincidentally actually one of the VCs that I brought in, 4 years later ended up being one of the investors, in the startup. And so the last thing, honestly, that I will say about the value of being in VC is all about network. And so for me, by being able to get my foot in the door when I was in college and being able to host events and do things that, were bringing people around in the space, I was able to build a network, build a reputation for myself so that when I went to go down and visit my mom in Tulsa, and I'm just talking with folks that, I've met before. And so, when the firm, meets me, they're like, oh, this person belongs here. And, I think a lot of just this venture in the startup space is being able to convince folks that you belong.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. Like the importance of the network, like the people. That's really what matters. I think a lot of the other stuff you can figure out along the way, but it's the people that can really change your life and the course and the trajectory that you're on. So I appreciate you for mentioning that. let's fast forward a little bit. So you were a serial entrepreneur. I read about the party event planning, not event planning, but the event hosting business that you had in college. Sounds like you made some good money on that. By the way, I think I read that you made like 250K throughout the course of that. But let's talk about Boot Up a little bit more and starting that. So man, you built this platform, this tech-based platform, but looking at your resume and your background, dropped out of the MBA program after 6 weeks. You went to undergrad for like American Studies. You obviously don't have a technical background on paper. So how did you start this tech company without the technical background? And what kind of advice would you give for other non-technical founders that are hoping to do the same?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with the advice before I go into how I did it. Look, in general, you got to take risks in life. You're never gonna have all the information. You're never gonna be fully comfortable. You're never gonna feel like you're fully ready to do stuff. And so I think being comfortable with that uncertainty, being comfortable with that risk, and being excited to try and do new things, right? Like that's what takes people's lives to the next level. Even if you strike out 3 times, you hit a home run the 4th time, that home run can change your life. My last year of school, I went to go develop out my first software platform, and we were basically just building like a social, ticketing platform, social events platform. And so with that being said, right, I couldn't code, but I used some of the money from that events business that I started to contract out a team of developers. And so that was my first time managing a technical team. And obviously, I made so many mistakes just because I had never done that before. But all the mistakes that I made, I remember every last mistake I made when it was time to go build stuff for Boot Up. And so with Boot Up, what I was really able to do is, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Jacob Dodd, young man graduating from Washington University in St. Louis this year. Jacob really led, our technical development, and I knew as a non-technical founder, your product is going to have issues if you do not have someone technical at least overseeing what's being contracted in the very beginning. And so we had Jacob work on the software some, and then we also contracted out a software development shop in Suriname, South America. The per capita GDP in Suriname is $5,000, 5,000 US dollars a year. And so, there's a huge cost arbitrage that allowed me to not use a crazy amount of money to go get this thing built out because I didn't necessarily have the skills to build it out. And then we had an individual who had the skills who could oversee, make sure that everything was going according to plan, going according to timeline, all those things. And so, I'll say, for your non-technical founders, don't let being non-technical, be something that, makes you shy away from starting something. But you just got to be savvy about things. And then I guess one last piece, we actually did not have a fully functioning software when we closed our first enterprise customer. And that speaks again, right, to how the startup world, nothing is really just like perfect. A lot of stuff is just tied up with duct tape. And so what we did when we first closed our first customer, which was Dell Technologies, right, one of the biggest hardware companies in the world, we had a landing page that we built on Wix, and our database and backend was just Airtable. And so, we went out and we had all of our sales materials, but at the end of the day, you're building a business. Technology is this lever that allows you to build a more efficient, faster growing, stronger business rather than technology being the business itself.
Yo, man, I appreciate you for sharing that story, bro. Because I think I meet different people in the tech space, and some are like saying, "Hey, I need to go raise capital before I build an MVP for this thing." And some are like, "Yo, I'm just gonna bootstrap it, get a proof of concept, show that there's a demand for this, and then I'll get worried about the VC dollars." But I think it's amazing, and I hear different motivational MVP stories about how people built their MVP. I know one group, they use Instagram and Excel spreadsheets to trade shoes at Trade Block, and they use that for their MVP. So it's just amazing when I hear these different stories. And I was like, man, you got Dell, like big Dell, like Fortune 500, probably Fortune 100 Dell to sign on with like just a back end of like Airtable, basically an Excel spreadsheet. And
Yep.
that's wild. That's wild.
But I mean, I think again, right, this shows like that piece of why founders don't. I'm not even gonna say founders, why people really shouldn't be afraid to just go out and take that leap because you really never know what's gonna happen. Obviously, that landing page we had professionally done. The landing page
Yeah.
look now. But at the end of the day, man, everybody's trying to figure stuff out. Even these big corporates are trying to figure stuff out. And so I think the quicker that people understand that nobody's really got it figured out and everybody's learning, everybody's trying to grow, everybody's trying to figure it out, you feel more empowered to take those leaps, take those steps yourself.
quick follow-up question for you. Where were you got or 2 questions. Number 1, do you kind of ballpark remember how much money you invested, like, of your own personal money in that dev team in South America up to that point when you got your first
Yeah.
customer?
Yep. So paid the dev team and then also paid Jacob a little bit as well, for a total like $25,000.
Okay. All right, cool. So nothing crazy. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars where people think they gotta go raise money. Like, literally, you could start saving this up. All right, cool. Good stuff.
Yep.
And then now I've got to ask you this because I mentioned it earlier. You mean you raised over 2.1 mil, all black cap table, I believe, or all black VC firms that put money on the table for you. Number one, where were you at, like in the development process? Had you moved beyond the Airtable back end when you raised that money, or kind of where were you at currently, or where was the company at currently when you raised that capital?
Oh yeah, we were making money. Actually, so the month that we closed, or we got all of the signatures, we had just closed $120,000 contract that month, and so um, you know, it seems like it's a huge far cry from where we were when we closed the Dell contract, but it was really only like 4 or 5 months later.
Wow.
Um, and the thing that I'll say, with the fundraising piece, it's like anything. Like if you want to succeed in life, you've got to be super intentional, right? You've got to be thinking ahead. And so for me, when we closed that Dell contract, I started hitting up every investor I knew. And I wasn't like, oh, hey, we need money. Like we closed the contract. I'm like, what do you need to see from a revenue perspective for you to feel comfortable or for you to feel excited about investing? We had 5 people give us metrics. Every month, as we got closer to hitting those metrics, I'm sending out emails, updating folks, letting them know we're getting closer, we're getting closer. Of the 5 people that gave us metrics, 4 of those people ended up coming through and cutting a check. And so I think, my advice for founders on that piece is if you're able to build a strong network of, potential investors, ask them what they want to see. And then all you got to do is give yourself the time to produce. And then now all of a sudden, the pressure is not on you in the meeting anymore. Now the pressure is on the investor to actually make good on what they said they would do. And, again, right, all this stuff is sales, right? Like you're pitching an investor to invest in your company, but you're really selling them on you. And, you putting yourself in a situation where the pressure is on the other person is always going to help you win in sales.
So I mentioned it earlier, you all black cap table, all black VC firms that invested. Was that intentional on your part, or was it just kind of the way things aligned based on your network?
I would say that my network definitely skewed that way, but it was definitely a very intentional decision. Like you think about all the stuff that we do that, whether it's the nonprofit, whether it's, the angel investing work that I do, even the company, if you look at, 78% of the folks that we're placing are black and brown, you know, definitely really about economic mobility, right? Closing what racial wealth gap. And with my investors, all of them have a track record of cutting checks into black and brown people. So now if I do what I'm supposed to do, and go have a huge exit for the company, that's bringing them back a bunch more money to go give to more black and brown founders to go do what I'm doing and just create this virtuous cycle of wealth creation. And so that's really why I wanted to do that. But then, I'll also say that, I think, the venture space, right? Like there's stats on, how much money, black and brown founders are able to raise, and so, I think it really speaks to the importance of having black investors, right, in the ecosystem. Because for me, I talked about, reaching out, 4 or 5 months early. But when I actually went to go pitch, it took me 2 weeks to close that money. But if I hadn't just been pitching to black folks, I'm not gonna lie to you, that I don't have any empirical evidence that says that it would have taken me longer. But I feel like even with the traction that I would have had, it would not have been nearly as smooth of a process.
You're an angel investor yourself, right? So you cutting some checks for people. What are you typically looking for before you decide to cut a check and invest in a startup or a startup founder?
Man, for me, it's all about the person. It's all about the person, and it's not about the business. It's not about anything else. For me, where I come in, just due to where I'm at in life, is super early, right? Because I can't write super big checks. And the way that I like to be helpful is, I'm a founder. I'm going through this as well, and so I like to just be able to be an ear that folks can talk to in a way that they can't necessarily talk to their investors. And so, as I say that it's the people, just to be a little bit more concrete about what characteristics, um, crazy level of curiosity. And, not just specifically about their business, but just as a human. Um, Crazy level of just grit and determination and passion. Right. And like you hear me saying crazy level, like I cannot emphasize crazy level enough. you know? And I think also it's got to be someone who actually has an outsized level of humility. And I think that's
Uh,
opposite from what a lot of people think that you should be looking for in a startup founder. But at the end of the day, like there are so many unknowns from when the company gets started to having a successful outcome. And at the end of the day, it's not about what the founder wants, it's about what the customers want. And that takes a level of humility when the customer is telling you something that goes against all of your intuitions, everything that you wanted to go do, and then also, you got to be able to have a founder that can go hire A plus people that are better than them, right? And again, that takes a level of humility. And so I think, like that curiosity, what I'm saying, that humility, that drive, that determination, that resilience, those are the things that I'm really looking for.
all right, we got a few more questions before I let you get out the hot seat. A follow-up question to the angel investing. What does that typically look like when you're making an angel investment in terms of how much equity founders typically have to give up, or is it a convertible note, safe note kind of situation? What does that typically look like for people that don't know or aren't really aware of angel investments?
Yeah. So for me, what I'll do is basically whatever the company is doing for their round. And so I've done convertible note, I've done a safe. With that being said, I don't set price points, don't try to like lead and set terms. And so, have done deals where, the valuation has been in $5 million range, have done deals where, the valuation has been in $25 million range. And so for me as an investor, I'm looking less at the price and more at the opportunity to support an incredible human really early on in their journey. um, but for founders, that first round of capital, you should not be taking a price round. You should be raising money via convertible note. You should be raising money via safe. If your investors are hounding you about raising money, via a price round for your first round of capital, as a founder, I would definitely look carefully at that and just try to understand why.
One more follow-up in the VC space for you. You mentioned when you were raising capital that you kind of leverage your network, who you knew, and things of that nature. I think that's great advice. How can people improve their chances of meeting these potential investors? Are there certain meetups, certain events, that certain spots they need to be out? They need to be hanging out in the hotel lobby, at the bar, where they need to be at to meet these potential investors.
Yeah. So there's a ton of online spaces, right? Like you go look at Twitter, right? My Twitter is only VCs and engineers and CEOs. Like I look at my Twitter following, I don't have like a big, platform on Twitter. I've got like 1,000 followers, but I said there's probably 5 billion in assets under management in my following on Twitter. And so that space is, don't sleep on Twitter. Twitter is like a strong professional network. And then, I mean, LinkedIn too. At the end of the day, online, if you can go build a brand for yourself, you can go build some thought leadership in whatever area that your thing is, it will make it so much easier to connect with folks. Because I'm not gonna lie, I see everybody that, slides in my DMs on Twitter. I see everybody that messages me on LinkedIn. And while I don't necessarily have the bandwidth to be able to respond to everyone, if someone's showing that they're a thought leader in a space to me, you know, I guarantee you I got the bandwidth to respond to them. And like you got to think for these investors, that is their business. That's how they make money. And so if you're able to show that you know more than 99.9% of the world in something, and then you reach out to someone, you've got a really good opportunity. And then the last thing that I'll say, and this is really what I did, I just tried to provide value to people before I asked them for anything. And so, my what I do my angel investments under, I call underground ventures. Before I had the means to actually cut checks, what I was doing is I was compiling a list of Black founders and sending them out to Black investors. And so, like me doing that basically built a network of folks where somebody did deal that I sent them. That means that there is something about the way that I think that resonates with them. And so, I'm not saying that folks should necessarily do that if that doesn't make sense for them. But if you can do something that provides value first, the level of like deference that you'll get like in the relationship and like in the interaction is so much higher.
Hey man, that is a cheat code to life right there. Like, no lie. Like, if somebody you know that you want to collaborate or work with or work for is doing something, maybe like the nonprofit, for example, you may need event volunteers for one of your events or something like that. Find out what event Chandler or whoever is happening, show up as a volunteer. Figure out how you can add value. There's so many different ways, both online, in person, whatever. I think that's a major key. One last question I got to ask you though, and this is a really big one. I think that some people kind of overlook. You mentioned that as a startup founder, a big part of your job is to hire a team of people that are smarter, better than you at certain aspects of the job that you're not so great at. I think leadership in the team and hiring is so critical and important. I think people are the best asset to any company. You're a startup founder, and there's a lot of startup founders out there that want to build this unicorn company, but they may not even have a lot of leadership experience. What kind of advice do you have for building a team successfully and leading that team properly? And what kind of takeaways do you think that people can kind of take away from your situation?
Yeah, man. So first thing I'm gonna say is that is the hardest part. That's harder than getting customers. That's harder than anything else. The thing that has been the most helpful for me on that is just being able to lean on and rely on people who are further than me in the journey. Right? Like we talked to you, you brought up Ruben, earlier, before the conversation started, right? And you know, I've been able to hear from him things that they've done to be able to get a high level of output but still, a manageable level of cost, right? And it's like this person's company is, 3 years ahead of where mine's at. No one's going to be able to give me better advice than someone who's 3 years ahead of where I'm at, And so, like, there are some of these things that you're going to face in a startup that you could have never prepared to face before. And so, being able to have a network of folks who are a few steps ahead of you that you can go to when you're getting those lumps, who can tell you, oh, hey, watch out for this before it happens, is so, so valuable. And I'll even say, on the investment side, right? Like, folks get caught up in this hype about raising all this venture money. The money is very important, to be like, this gasoline on the flame, to make things be able to grow and be bigger. But if you've got really strong investors, really good investors, when you're dealing with difficulties around team, when you're dealing with difficulties around leadership, when you're dealing with difficulties of, hey, we're working fully remote, what cadence should we be doing non-work, related get-togethers at? If you have really good investors, that's also another group of folks, that you can lean on and that will open up their network, of another subset of founders who are maybe a few years or a few steps ahead of you in your journey.
Gotcha. How big is your team currently?
We've got 13. So we've got 3 here in the States, and then we've got 10 across Bolivia and Venezuela.
Nice. Good stuff, man. Yo, man, this has been a pleasure, bro. I feel like I'm ready to go start my own company. I'm really looking at starting a tech apprenticeship because I feel like I don't know if it'll be nonprofit for profit, but I feel like that's where I could really have a big impact and really move the needle. Like you, really passionate about closing the racial wealth gap, and I think this is the best way to do it. I think we definitely need more entrepreneurs, but even if we can just get more people in tech or in STEM, getting higher paying jobs, that'll really move the needle and change the narrative. And I think that's kind of the way to go. So I'm really excited about the work you're doing, man. I think you, Ruben, there's a few other cats out there doing some great work, but I'm really proud of you guys, and I love seeing what you guys are building. Let people know. I know you're on Twitter, you're on LinkedIn. In my opinion, it's easy to find you, but let the people know where they can find you and how they can keep up with the journey of Bootup.
Yeah, definitely. So you can find me on all social platforms at Chandler Malone, or at the username Chano out of there. And then you can find us at Boot Up at Join Boot Up on all social, and then at www.joinbootup.com. And then lastly, for the nonprofit, you can find us at Techknowledge or www.techknowledge.org. And so I'll spell that out again. It's TECHNOLIJ.
Good stuff. Hey, one last question. You want to make any shout outs or anything like that? We used to do it. I don't do it as consistently, but I know Women's History Month is coming up, so you may want to make a shout out to some important people in your life. I'll let you do that if you want to.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess on the Women's History Month side, first of all, I want to give a shout out to our lead investor, Ulili from Cape Port Capital. Really helped us, just put it all together. And also big congrats to her and her partner, Brian, for closing a $126 million fund with 2 Black managing partners. That's huge. Also want to give a shout out to Candace Matthews Burkeen, another investor in our round. And I feel like somebody who just believed in me really, really early on. It's been super inspiring to see what they've been able to build, with Lightship Capital, but also, on the foundation side and all the economic developments they're bringing to Cincinnati with their work. And then two of the founders, in my portfolio, want to give a huge shout out to Ariana the techie. She's working on some amazing things in the Web3 space, and is just an incredible person. And then also want to give a huge shout out to Edna Martinson. She's the founder of Bottle Learning. They just crossed 4 million users on her math game for kindergarten through 6-year-olds. And she just recently got Forbes under 30 this past year. And so very well deserved. All these women in my life inspire me so much, and really just push me to be the best that I can be. And yeah, and I think other shout outs, man. Man, really, you just got to say thankful for my parents, man. Like I feel like they did such an incredible job of allowing me to see what the top 1% of life look like, but also what the rest of life look like. And me being able to see both, I think gave me a level of ambition and desire for myself. But I think also a level of consciousness for what I wanted to build myself in. So yeah, that's my shout outs.
Hey, that's good stuff, man. I'm glad you closed it out with the parents. I heard your mom had a big impact on you, growing up, making sure that exactly like you said, seeing the full spectrum of what life is really like. So I'm gonna close it out there, man. But again, Chandler, bro, I appreciate you for coming on, man. I think it's a lot of insight, a lot of value that people gain from this. So I'm really looking forward to following your journey and keeping up with you moving forward.
Look, man, I appreciate you too, man. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'll say, look, when you start going down, the company building route, definitely hit me, definitely tap in. If there's anything I can do to help, would love to.
Definitely. No doubt. And then for you guys, the people watching, I really appreciate you watching. Staying tuned. Make sure you like this video, share it with a friend. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you missing out. You're doing yourself a disservice. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. But that's it for this episode. We'll be back again, like always, next week. So stay tuned and we'll be back. Peace.